Welcome to the Auditor Training for Hours of Service, or HOS. We're going to run through the basics of what you should be looking for, the rules that apply, and some exceptions. The FMCSA, under pressure to cut down on accidents and fatalities involving trucks and commercial carriers, began tracking data to identify ways to reduce these issues. After some study, they attributed a sizable portion of the crashes to driver fatigue. To cut down on driver fatigue, they implemented means of tracking driver activity, as well as limits on those activities. Logs, otherwise known as Record of Duty Status, or RODS, are the way that drivers track their daily activities. Each driver is required, except for some very specific exemptions, to complete a daily log, which shows what they've done that day. These logs have been in various forms, but primarily either paper log or electronic logs. Nowadays, pretty much everybody is on electronic log device, or ELD, after December 17th of 2017. But there are still some folks out there on AOBRDs, which stands for Automatic Onboard Recording Device, and a paper log. All logs contain several necessary pieces of information. Each paper log needs to contain the following items: the name of the driver and their signature, the name and address of the terminal out of which the driver is operating, at least the city and state. It doesn't need to have the actual physical address, but it at least needs to have the city and state that the driver was operating out of. Now, keep in mind when auditing that might be different than the actual main terminal of the company. If a driver operates out of their home, they might be in a different time zone than the main logs that you're auditing for that terminal. You also need the name of the co-driver if applicable, the shipping document number or name of the shipper and commodity, the truck and trailer number, the grid with the daily activities tracked and total hours, as well as remarks. All of those need to be complete and legible for it to be a valid log, and being legible is important, especially when using paper logs. It was needed to make sure that those people are writing in a legible fashion, or else it could be considered a form and manner violation. The driver's activities are divided into 4 basic categories. These are the ones that you see on the vast majority of logs. And there are some exceptions, and we'll talk about those shortly. Off-duty. This is any activity that's not work-related. Some examples of this are eating at a restaurant, taking a walk, sleeping, something along those lines. These are not related to work. You're not being told by your employer what to do or when you're supposed to do it. You are just doing these things because it's your personal time. A sleeper berth. This is another off-duty activity, but this is very specifically defined as being in the sleeper berth of a truck that obviously has one. You don't necessarily have to be sleeping, but you do have to be in that berth. So you can't be in the sleeper berth and in a restaurant if the DOT is getting particular. Driving. Obviously, this is any time spent driving the truck for work purposes. There are other statuses that you can use when driving for personal reasons, but this is under dispatch. This is going back to the terminal, anything that involves working for the company. Then there's on duty, not driving. Now, this is a very broad category, but it's basically anything work-related that isn't driving. So that's inspections. That's scales. That's maintenance on the vehicle. It's fueling, especially in that. That's important. It always has to be on duty. This is a very broad category, so there's lots of different things that can fit under there. Some other companies include other categories in their logs that you might see. One of these categories is yard moves. So that's anytime you are at either a pickup or drop-off yard or at your terminal yard and you just need to move the truck a little bit. Sometimes it's done by other people. You put the truck in yard move first, then you move it. It does count as an on-duty activity, but not as a driving activity. The other one that we see a lot is personal conveyance, or PC. Personal conveyance is using your vehicle as your personal driving vehicle. The rule was originally put in if you were at a truck stop and you needed to go to a Walmart to get some soap or to get some food at a restaurant, something along those lines. And it is only to be used for personal reasons. You cannot further a load. The directions are vague, but it does specifically say that you cannot use personal conveyance to further a load. That means you cannot get closer to your destination. If you're under load, you can't get closer to a pickup point or a drop-off location. You can only use it for personal reasons. You cannot use it after your last drop-off to drive home. You can use it for other miscellaneous things, like going to a friend's house or something like that. Let's say you're driving through Arizona and you have a friend that lives in Arizona and you're not under dispatch and you just feel like going and visiting them. You can put that in there as personal. It is an off-duty form of driving, which means you don't have to track it for hours of service, but you do need to say while you're driving that you're in personal conveyance, because if you don't, then an officer stopping you will just assume that you are driving without keeping track of your location. Now, let's do a quick review. On a paper log, here are the requirements that must be listed. Each paper log needs to contain the following items: the name of the driver and their signature, the name and address of the terminal out of which the driver is operating, at least the city and state. It doesn't need to have the actual physical address, but at least it needs to have the city and the state that the driver was operating out of. You also need the name of the co-driver, if applicable. The shipping document number or name of the shipper and commodity, truck and trailer number, the grid with the daily activities tracked, and total hours as well as remarks. All of these need to be complete and legible for it to be a valid log, and being legible is important, especially when using paper logs. On electronic logs, the requirements are the same, but the placements are different, so I will go over those as well. The driver's name and signature, the name and address of the terminal out of which the driver is operating, at least the city and state. Again, it doesn't need to have the actual physical address, but at least it needs to have the city and state that the driver was operating out of. You also need the name of the co-driver if applicable, the shipping document number or name of the shipper and commodity, truck and trailer number, the grid with the daily activities tracked, and total hours as well as remarks. The DOT can be very particular on every aspect of the driver's daily log, so it is vital that you be as accurate as possible when doing an audit.